General Tai-Ho Kim sat in his office at Terran Defense Corps headquarters, reading the official invitation for the third time that morning. The document had arrived through diplomatic channels from the Galactic Military Coalition, an organization that had never acknowledged Earth's military existence before this moment. The invitation itself was impressive, printed on what appeared to be metal that somehow felt soft to the touch, with text that shifted between different languages as he watched. It was addressed specifically to General Kim, Senior Military Commander, Terran Defense Corps in perfect Korean, though he had never provided his name or rank to any galactic organization. "General," said Research Director Sujin Lee as she entered his office carrying her own copy of the invitation, "I've been analyzing this request, and I'm still not sure I understand what they want from us." Kim looked up from the document and gestured for Lee to take a seat across from his desk. Lee was a small, intense woman who had spent the last 10 years studying everything Earth's intelligence services could learn about alien military organizations and tactics. "According to this invitation, they want our soldiers to participate in something called the Universal Combat Effectiveness Study," Kim said. "They're testing combat effectiveness, tactical adaptability, and battlefield survival capabilities across 47 different species." 47 species, Lee repeated, pulling out her tablet and scrolling through data. "That includes every major military power in known galactic civilization. The Zentorian war machine, the aquatic battle fleet, the Crystal Empire's warrior castes, the Merchant Guild's corporate army." Colonel Woojin Park knocked on the office door and entered without waiting for permission. This was his usual habit, developed during 20 years of military service in situations where formal protocols could get people killed. "General, I've been reviewing the tactical specifications for this combat study," Park said, setting down a thick folder of printed reports. "I have to ask the obvious question, why would they include us in this assessment? Our entire military consists of maybe 50,000 active personnel. Compare that to the Zentorian war machine with their 10 million soldiers, or the Crystal Empire with their warrior-bred population of 100 million. Kim stood up and walked to the window of his office, which looked out over the Terran Defense Corps training facility. Below, he could see human soldiers conducting routine exercises that looked primitive compared to the advanced training methods used by galactic military forces. "Because we're new," said military psychologist Haijin Choi as she entered the office carrying yet another copy of the invitation along with several analysis reports. "They want baseline data from a recently spacefaring species to complete their comprehensive database of military capabilities." Choi was the Defense Corps leading expert on combat psychology and had spent her career studying why human soldiers behaved differently from other species' military forces. Her research was classified at the highest levels because it revealed things about human nature that the government preferred to keep private. "Think about it from their perspective," Choi continued, settling into the remaining chair in Kim's crowded office. "They've been conducting this study for 50 years, analyzing every established military power in the galaxy. But Earth has only been capable of interstellar travel for 30 years. We're the newest military force in galactic civilization. So we're like a control group in their experiment," Lee realized. "Fresh data from a species that hasn't been influenced by galactic military doctrine." Colonel Park opened his folder and began reading from the technical specifications. "The study is designed by the Zentorian War College to determine which species naturally produces the most effective individual soldiers. Each participating civilization sends their elite forces to compete in standardized combat scenarios that test everything from individual fighting ability to small unit tactics." Kim turned away from the window and looked at his team. These three people represented Earth's entire understanding of galactic military affairs, and their combined knowledge was based on fragments of information gathered from diplomatic contacts and intelligence operations. "What they don't understand," Kim said quietly, "is that human soldiers are trained according to completely different principles than any other military force in known space." "How different?" asked Lee. "While other species train their soldiers to be effective parts of larger technological systems, we train our soldiers to fight with nothing but their own capabilities," Kim explained. "Every other galactic military assumes their soldiers will have advanced equipment, reliable communications, constant resupply, and technical support." Choi nodded in understanding. "But human soldiers are trained to assume that none of those things will be available when they need them most." "Exactly," Park added. "I've read the preliminary reports on galactic military doctrine. Their soldiers are trained to operate advanced weapons systems, coordinate through sophisticated communication networks, and rely on supply chains that can deliver anything they need within hours." "And human soldiers?" "Are trained to make weapons from rocks if necessary, communicate with hand signals, and survive for weeks on whatever they can find or catch. Kim picked up the invitation again and read through the detailed requirements for participation. The study would take place over 6 months on a specially designed testing world that contained every type of combat environment imaginable. Each species would send their best soldiers to compete in challenges that tested individual capability, adaptability, and survival skills. The galaxy is about to discover why Earth's military doctrine is built around a single, fundamental philosophy, Kim said. Which is? Asked Lee. Assume everything will go wrong, Kim replied. Assume your equipment will break, your communications will fail, your supply lines will be cut, and your backup plans will not work. Then train soldiers to be effective under those conditions. The 4 military leaders sat in silence for a moment, considering the implications of what they were discussing. General, Choi said finally, do you think they have any idea what they're actually asking for? Kim smiled, but it was not a pleasant expression. Dr. Choi, they think they're inviting Earth's military to participate in a friendly competition that will help them complete their academic research on combat effectiveness. And what are they actually doing? They're giving us the opportunity to demonstrate why human soldiers are the deadliest individual fighters in the universe. The combat trials were held on testing world Gamma 7, a planet that had been artificially constructed by the Galactic Military Coalition specifically for evaluating military effectiveness. The entire world was essentially one massive training facility, with different continents designed to simulate every type of battlefield environment that military forces might encounter in galactic warfare. One continent contained sprawling urban environments with tall buildings, underground tunnels, and complex street layouts that mimicked the cities found on hundreds of different worlds. Another continent was covered with dense forests and mountainous terrain that challenged soldiers to fight in natural environments without the support of technology. The planet also contained deep space combat simulators, underwater battle zones, Arctic survival areas, and even sections that reproduced the unique gravitational conditions found near black holes and neutron stars. Every possible combat scenario had been anticipated and recreated for testing purposes. Sergeant Daehyun-oh stood on the transport platform as his small human contingent arrived at the main testing facility. Earth's military delegation consisted of exactly 12 soldiers, representing every branch of the Terran Defense Corps. They looked extremely small and insignificant compared to the massive delegations that other galactic powers had sent to participate in the study. The Zentorian war machine had brought 300 elite soldiers, each one equipped with advanced battle armor that cost more than most Earth cities' annual budgets. The Crystal Empire's delegation included 500 warrior caste fighters whose weapons were grown from living crystal and powered by their own life force. The Aquatic Collective had sent 200 of their finest naval commandos, equipped with environmental suits that allowed them to fight effectively in any atmospheric condition. Even the Merchant Guild, which was primarily an economic organization, had brought 150 corporate soldiers whose equipment included the most expensive military technology money could buy. The human team looked primitive in comparison. Their equipment consisted of standard-issue rifles that used chemical propellants instead of energy beams, body armor made from woven synthetic materials rather than advanced composite shields, and communication gear that relied on radio waves instead of quantum entanglement networks. Welcome, Terran representatives, said Combat Coordinator Vextal, a professional military analyst from the Zentorian species who had been assigned to oversee Earth's participation in the study. Your equipment appears to be quite basic compared to galactic military standards. It works, Sergeant O replied simply, checking his rifle with the automatic movements of someone who had performed the same equipment inspection thousands of times. The weapon looked ancient and crude compared to the sleek energy weapons that other species carried, but O treated it with the respect of a tool that had kept him alive through multiple combat deployments. The first phase of testing began with what the study organizers considered straightforward combat scenarios. Each military unit was given identical objectives: eliminate specified targets in controlled environments while maintaining unit cohesion and minimizing casualties. Every participating species performed well during these initial tests. Their advanced equipment functioned exactly as designed, their supply lines delivered everything they needed on schedule, and their communication systems allowed for perfect coordination between individual soldiers and their command structures. Combat engineer Eugene Yoon had been assigned to observe and analyze the performance of other galactic military units during the testing process. She spent hours watching alien soldiers conduct their operations, taking detailed notes about their tactics, equipment usage, and organizational methods. Sergeant, she said to O during a break between testing sessions, I've been watching how these other military forces operate, and there's something interesting about their approach to combat. What do you mean? They're all fighting like they're still connected to their home command structures. Every decision they make, every tactical movement they perform, every piece of equipment they use, it all assumes that they have constant support from larger military organizations. Medic Ha-Young Nam had been conducting her own observations from the medical monitoring station where she was responsible for tracking the health and performance of all human participants during the combat trials. Yujin is right, Nam said, looking at her tablet full of data about the alien military units. Look at their communication systems requirements, their supply chain dependencies, their technical support needs. These soldiers can't operate independently for more than a few hours without direct support from their larger military organizations. The alien soldiers were impressive when everything worked according to plan. Their equipment was more advanced than anything Earth had ever developed. Their training was sophisticated and comprehensive. Their tactical coordination was flawless when they could communicate with their command structures and access their supply systems. But Engineer Yoon had noticed something that the study organizers had not anticipated. Sergeant, what happens if their advanced systems stop working? What if their communication networks go down or their supply lines get cut? Before Oh could answer her question, Testing Director Korth made an announcement that would change everything about the combat effectiveness study. All military units prepare for Phase 2 of the evaluation process. Korth's voice echoed through the testing facility's communication systems. Beginning immediately, all external support systems will be disabled. This includes communications with home command structures, resupply operations, technical assistance, and equipment maintenance support. The announcement continued with specific details that made several alien military commanders look concerned. Each unit will be required to survive and complete their assigned objectives using only the equipment and supplies they currently carry. No additional resources will be provided. No technical support will be available. No communication with external command structures will be permitted. The objective of Phase 2 is to test individual soldier capability and unit adaptability under degraded operational conditions, Korth explained. This phase will continue until objectives are completed or units are eliminated. Within the first few hours of Phase 2 testing, something remarkable began to happen. Most of the galactic military units, despite their advanced equipment and superior training, became almost completely helpless when their technological advantages were removed. Zentorian soldiers who had been perfectly effective when connected to their mathematical command networks became confused and ineffective when forced to make independent decisions. Crystal Empire warriors whose weapons required constant energy supply from their home bases found themselves carrying expensive but useless equipment. Aquatic collective commandos whose environmental suits depended on regular maintenance and resupply began experiencing equipment failures that left them vulnerable and unable to complete their missions. But something completely different happened with the human soldiers. Without their communication links to Earth Command, the human team became more coordinated, not less. Without resupply operations, they began improvising solutions and making do with whatever materials they could find. Without technical support, they started repairing and modifying their own equipment to work better under the degraded conditions. Sergeant O watched his team adapt to the changed conditions and felt proud of their performance. "This is just like training back home," he told his soldiers. "Everything breaks eventually. We fight with what we have, not with what we wish we had." For the first time since the testing began, the human military delegation was outperforming every other species in the study. The second phase of testing began with the systematic shutdown of all external support systems that the galactic military units had been relying on during the first round of combat trials. Testing Director Korth watched from the observation center as communication networks went silent, supply delivery systems stopped functioning, and technical support links were severed one by one. The effect on most galactic military forces was immediate and devastating. Zentorian soldiers who had been performing flawlessly just hours before began making confused decisions when they could no longer receive mathematical guidance from their command computers. Crystal Empire warriors found themselves carrying weapons that no longer functioned without constant energy supply from their home base power systems. But something completely unexpected happened with the human military unit. Demolitions expert Sung Minute On had been assigned to clear a fortified position using standard Earth military explosives when his equipment pack was deliberately disabled by the testing facility's systems. His bombs, detonators, and shaped charges all stopped working within minutes of the second phase beginning. Most soldiers from other species would have been unable to continue their mission without proper demolitions equipment. On simply walked around the testing facility for 20 minutes, collecting materials that other people would consider garbage. Like training back home, he muttered to himself as he used chemical cleaning supplies from a maintenance closet to create improvised explosive devices. Always assume your gear will break at the worst possible moment. Within an hour, he had created bombs from soap, fertilizer, and metal containers that were more effective than the advanced explosives he had been carrying before. The fortified position was cleared using materials that any soldier could find anywhere in the galaxy. Sniper Eun Young Kim faced a different challenge when her precision rifle was deliberately destroyed by enemy action during a long-range engagement exercise. The weapon had cost Earth's military more money than most people earned in a year, and its advanced targeting systems had been designed specifically for space combat conditions. Backup plans for backup plans, Kim said to herself as she began constructing a new weapon using components from the testing facility's infrastructure. Most galactic military snipers would have been completely useless without their specialized equipment. Kim used metal pipes, springs from furniture, and optical components from broken computers to build a rifle that was actually more accurate than her original weapon. She completed her mission using a gun that she had built from spare parts while lying in a muddy ditch under enemy fire. The alien military observers were watching these human adaptations with growing amazement and concern. War mathematician Prexvol of the Zentorian forces ran constant calculations trying to understand what he was witnessing. Impossible, he calculated for the 15th time that day. According to all established military theory, combat effectiveness should decrease by 89.7% when soldiers lose their technological support systems. For you maybe, replied Sergeant Daehuno, who had just completed his assigned objectives using weapons and tools that he had made from debris scattered around the testing facility. We train for everything breaking down. Equipment failure is just Tuesday for us. Combat Coordinator Vextal was responsible for monitoring all military units during the testing process, and his findings were troubling every assumption that galactic military science had made about soldier effectiveness. The human soldiers are performing better under degraded conditions than they performed under optimal conditions, he reported to his supervisors. This contradicts every principle of military effectiveness that we have ever documented. Dr. Military Psychologist Young-Ho Seo had been studying the human soldiers' behavior patterns throughout both phases of testing. His analysis revealed something that would fundamentally change how the galaxy understood warfare. Other species train their soldiers to be effective operators of complex technological systems, he explained to a group of confused alien military leaders. Their soldiers are designed to be parts of larger machines, weapon systems, communication networks, supply chains, command structures. And humans? Humans train individual soldiers to operate completely independently, without any external systems at all, Seo replied. Each human soldier is taught to be a complete military unit by himself or herself. The third phase of testing was designed specifically to push soldier adaptability to its absolute limits. Testing Director Korth announced the new parameters with confidence that this would finally reveal human limitations. Phase 3 will introduce active sabotage and deliberate equipment destruction, he explained to the assembled military units. Enemy forces will actively work to destroy your weapons, disrupt your communications, and eliminate your supplies. You must complete objectives while under constant attack on your operational capabilities. The announcement caused panic among most galactic military delegations. Their soldiers had been trained to fight enemies, not to fight enemies while their own equipment was being destroyed by additional hostile forces. Within hours of Phase 3 beginning, most galactic military units had collapsed completely. Zentorian soldiers could not function when their mathematical command networks were being actively disrupted. Crystal Empire warriors became helpless when enemy saboteurs destroyed their energy supply lines. The Aquatic Collective's commandos were eliminated from the testing when sabotage teams punctured their environmental suits and flooded their equipment with corrosive chemicals. The Merchant Guild's corporate soldiers surrendered when their expensive weapons were systematically destroyed by coordinated enemy action. But the human soldiers treated Phase 3 as if nothing had changed from their normal training routine. Communications specialist Jin Young Park continued coordinating his team using hand signals, voice codes, and improvised message systems when all electronic communication was eliminated. Standard Protocol 7, he announced calmly. Assume all radio communication is compromised. Switch to visual and audio backup systems. Combat engineer Eugene Yoon built new weapons from whatever materials were available each time the sabotage teams destroyed her equipment. This is actually easier than training exercises back on Earth, she told her teammates. At least here we know the equipment is supposed to break. Medic Nam treated wounded soldiers using medical supplies she created from plants and chemicals found in the testing environment when her medical kit was destroyed. Field medicine basics, she explained to amazed alien observers. Always assume your medical supplies will be the first thing the enemy targets. The human soldiers continued completing their objectives with the same calm efficiency they had shown during the earlier phases, as if active sabotage and equipment destruction were normal parts of any military operation. Because for human soldiers, they were. Testing Director Korth had spent his entire career studying military effectiveness across dozens of different species, and he had never encountered soldiers who performed better when their conditions became worse. The human results from Phases 1 and 2 had challenged every principle of military science that the Galactic Coalition had developed over centuries of research. Korth decided that the final phase of testing would be designed specifically to prove that human soldiers had limitations like every other military force in the galaxy. He was convinced that if conditions became primitive enough, humans would finally demonstrate the same helplessness that other species showed when deprived of their technological advantages. "Attention all military units," he announced over the facility's communication system. "Phase 4 will begin with the complete elimination of all external support systems. This includes not only communications and resupply, but also all personal equipment, weapons, and supplies." The announcement caused immediate alarm among the remaining galactic military delegations. Representatives from various species began protesting that such conditions were unrealistic and unfair to soldiers who had been trained to operate advanced military systems. "Each unit will be stripped of all equipment and placed in a hostile environment with only natural capabilities," Korth continued, ignoring the protests. "Objectives must be completed using only what can be found or created from the local environment. No manufactured items of any kind will be provided." The alien military units were horrified. Zentorian soldiers without their mathematical computation devices were essentially helpless. Crystal Empire warriors whose weapons were part of their own biology could not function without energy sources to power their natural abilities. Aquatic collective commandos required specialized environmental suits just to breathe the planet's atmosphere. Every other species in the study failed the fourth phase immediately. Their soldiers, deprived of all technological support, were unable to complete even the simplest objectives. The human team not only survived the fourth phase, they began to thrive under the primitive conditions. Squad leader Dong-Ho Lee had been a construction worker before joining Earth's military, and his background in building things from raw materials served him well when all manufactured equipment was removed. Within hours of the phase beginning, he was creating effective weapons from rocks, metal scraps, and pieces of wood he found scattered around the testing environment. "Basic infantry training," he explained to the amazed alien observers who were monitoring his progress. "Every human soldier learns how to make weapons from whatever is available in the local environment. You never know when you might need to fight with nothing but rocks and sticks." Communications specialist Jin Young Park had grown up in rural Korea where electronic communication was unreliable, and his childhood experience with basic signaling methods proved invaluable when all electronic systems were disabled. He established coordination networks between his scattered team members using hand signals, voice codes, and simple visual markers that required no technology whatsoever. "Old-school tactics," he explained while setting up a message relay system using mirrors and reflected sunlight. "Technology fails all the time. Humans learned to communicate effectively thousands of years before we invented electronics." Combat engineer Yoojin Yoon surprised everyone, including her own teammates, by building effective fortifications and defensive positions using only stones, dirt, and vegetation from the testing environment. Her constructions were not only functional but were actually more effective than the advanced defensive systems that other species had been using during earlier phases. "Construction skills," she said while showing alien military engineers how to build walls that could stop energy weapon fire using nothing but rocks and mud. "Every human soldier learns basic engineering as part of standard training. You have to know how to build things if you want to survive when your fancy equipment breaks." The galactic military observers were witnessing something that challenged their understanding of what soldiers could accomplish. They were watching human fighters become more dangerous as the conditions became more primitive and desperate. Dr. Research Director Soo-Jin Lee had been documenting every aspect of human performance throughout all phases of testing, and her findings were revolutionary. "The pattern is clear," she reported to the study coordinators. "Human military doctrine assumes worst-case scenarios as the normal operating environment. They train for total system failure as standard procedure rather than as an emergency situation." War mathematician Prexval was running constant calculations, trying to find some mathematical explanation for what he was observing. But why would any species develop military training that assumes failure of all support systems? This approach seems inefficient and wasteful of resources. Sergeant O had just completed his latest objective by eliminating a series of targets using weapons he had crafted from broken furniture and scrap metal found around the testing facility. He was covered in dirt and improvised camouflage made from local vegetation, but he looked completely comfortable and confident. Because on Earth, everything always goes wrong eventually, he said with a grim smile while cleaning his improvised weapons. Our weather is unpredictable. Our terrain is dangerous. Our equipment breaks constantly. So we learned to fight assuming we'd have nothing but ourselves to rely on. Strategic analyst HYO Jung-on had been monitoring communications from galactic military headquarters across known space, and her findings revealed the true scope of what the testing was revealing about human capabilities. The difference is fundamental, she explained to a group of alien military theorists who were trying to understand the test results. Galactic military forces are optimized for success. They are designed to perform perfectly when everything works according to plan. And human forces? Human forces are optimized for failure, On replied. They are designed to continue fighting effectively when everything goes wrong, when all plans fail, and when soldiers have nothing left except their own skills and determination. The implications of this discovery were staggering. While every other species in the galaxy had spent centuries developing more advanced technology and more sophisticated support systems for their soldiers, humans had spent the same time learning to fight without any support systems at all. Other species had created perfect soldiers who could accomplish amazing things under perfect conditions. Humans had created soldiers who excelled specifically when conditions were terrible and everything that could go wrong had gone wrong. Testing coordinator Vextal was forced to acknowledge what his instruments were clearly documenting. Human combat effectiveness increases in direct proportion to the degradation of operating conditions. This is unprecedented in all galactic military research. The final testing data showed something that would terrify military planners across the galaxy. Human soldiers were not just adapting to primitive conditions, they were becoming more creative, more lethal, and more effective as the testing environment became more challenging. When every other military force in the galaxy had been reduced to helplessness, humans were operating at peak efficiency using nothing but improvised tools and natural abilities. The Universal Combat Effectiveness Study concluded after 6 months of testing that would be remembered as the most disturbing military research project in galactic history. Testing Director Korth stood before the assembled observers in the main analysis center, holding data files that contained information no civilization had wanted to discover. The final testing facility looked like a battlefield from some primitive war. Human soldiers had turned the carefully designed evaluation environment into a maze of improvised fortifications, homemade weapons, and survival shelters built from materials that were never intended for military use. Ladies, gentlemen, and representatives of various galactic species, Korth announced to the packed observation chamber, I am required to report the final results of our comprehensive military effectiveness analysis. His voice carried the tone of someone delivering news that he wished he did not have to share. Human soldiers demonstrate combat effectiveness ratings that increase rather than decrease under adverse operational conditions. This finding contradicts every established principle of military science in our database. General Tai-Ho Kim received the complete final report through secure transmission to Earth's military headquarters. The document was thousands of pages long, but the summary was simple and terrifying. In optimal conditions with full technological support, Kim read aloud to his staff, human soldiers ranked 7th out of 47 species tested. However, in degraded conditions with no external support, humans ranked first by significant margins in every category measured. The data was undeniable and completely unprecedented. When their equipment worked perfectly, human soldiers were competent but unremarkable compared to the galaxy's advanced military forces. But when everything failed, when all support was removed, when conditions became desperate, they became the deadliest individual fighters in known space. Supreme War Leader Zex Krone of the Galactic Defense Force had been observing the human testing with growing alarm. He stood up in the analysis center and demanded explanations for what seemed impossible. But how is this possible? He asked, his voice filled with frustration. Every military theory we have developed over the past 1,000 years indicates that soldier effectiveness must decrease when support systems are removed. Combat psychologist Hai-Jin Choi had been analyzing human military psychology throughout the entire testing period, and her findings explained why the results were so shocking to galactic military leaders. The fundamental difference is philosophical, she explained to the assembled alien military experts. Every other species trains soldiers to be effective components within larger technological systems. Your soldiers are designed to be parts of bigger machines, communication networks, weapon systems, supply chains, command structures. And humans? Asked War Leader Zex Krone. Humans train individual soldiers to be complete combat systems by themselves, Choi replied. Each human soldier is taught to function as an entire military unit compressed into a single person. Strategic military analyst Dong Wu-yo had been comparing human training methods with those used by other galactic civilizations. His research revealed the source of the effectiveness difference. Your military doctrine creates specialists, he explained. Soldiers who are very good at operating specific types of equipment or performing particular roles within larger organizations. That is correct, replied Zentorian war mathematician Prexvol. Specialization creates maximum efficiency and optimal performance. But human military doctrine creates generalists, Yo continued. Every human soldier is trained to perform every military function independently. They learn to be infantry, engineers, medics, communication specialists, and weapons experts all at the same time. The truth that was emerging from the testing data was more disturbing than any galactic military leader had anticipated. While other civilizations had evolved beyond what they considered primitive warfare, humans had spent their entire history perfecting primitive warfare to levels that transcended the need for advanced technology. Emergency War Council Chairman Veltar made a desperate proposal to the assembled military representatives. We must immediately implement restrictions on human military participation in galactic conflicts. This species represents a threat to established military doctrine and strategic stability. Too late for that, replied Intelligence Director Kyung Suan, who had been monitoring galactic communications throughout the testing period. 4 to 7 different civilizations have submitted formal requests for human military advisory services in the past week alone. The galaxy had made a terrible mistake. They had invited humans to participate in their military effectiveness study expecting to document another minor military capability that could be added to their academic database. Instead, they had publicly demonstrated that human soldiers were the most lethal individual fighters in the universe. The testing broadcasts had been transmitted live to military academies across galactic civilization. Every general, every war planner, every strategic analyst in known space had watched human soldiers excel under conditions that rendered all other military forces completely helpless. But you seemed like such a peaceful species, protested War Coordinator Thexmai of the Harmony Defense League. Your civilization appeared to focus on art, culture, and cooperative development rather than military conquest. Sergeant Daehuno, who was still wearing improvised camouflage made from local vegetation and carrying weapons he had crafted from testing facility materials, smiled with the genuine friendliness that humans showed when they were not actively fighting for their lives. We are peaceful, he said sincerely. We prefer to solve problems through negotiation and cooperation whenever possible. We just happen to be extremely good at killing things efficiently when peace is not a realistic option. How do we defend ourselves against human soldiers? Asked Supreme Commander Velcrone, voicing the question that every military leader in the chamber was thinking. General Kim's expression became professionally sympathetic as he looked at the frightened alien military representatives. You don't defend against us. You invited us to demonstrate our military capabilities in front of the entire galaxy. Now every civilization knows that human soldiers are most dangerous when they have nothing but their own skills to work with. As the human military delegation prepared to board their transport ship and return to Earth, they left behind a galaxy that would never feel militarily secure again. Every civilization now understood that humans had spent their entire evolutionary history training soldiers to excel under the worst possible conditions. Strategic analyst Sujin Lee observed quietly as they walked toward their ship. They finally understand that human soldiers aren't just trained for combat, they're evolved for it. Dr. Choi was receiving constant updates on her communication device showing military recruitment requests flooding in from across the galaxy, despite the terror that the testing had created. Director, they're still requesting human military advisors even knowing what we're capable of. Colonel Woojin Park looked back at the testing facility where galactic military science had voluntarily demonstrated why humans were the deadliest soldiers in the universe. The galaxy learned too late that Earth doesn't produce soldiers who need perfect conditions to be effective. We produce soldiers who become more dangerous the worse things get, because that's the only kind of soldier that survives on Earth.